They called her name as a joke, a poor, quiet black girl no one took seriously. Laughter filled the school hall as she walked up to the stage. But the moment she opened her mouth, everything changed. The same people who mocked her left, speechless. What happened next shocked the entire school and the internet. They thought it would be funny. They thought it would be a joke. When her name was announced over the mic, people actually laughed. Next up, Tamara Williams. Some students chuckled. A few whispered under their breath. Wait, Tamara? She's actually performing? Most didn't even know who she was, and the ones who did knew her as the quiet girl, the poor girl, the one who always sat alone in the cafeteria, wore the same shoes every day, and never raised her hand in class. Tamara wasn't popular. She didn't post TikToks. She didn't hang out after school. She stayed out of everyone's way, almost invisible. So when she walked out onto that school stage during the annual talent show, the energy in the room shifted. But not in a good way. Some students smirked, others pulled out their phones, already expecting a disaster. You could feel the judgment in the air. She didn't look confident. She walked slowly, almost nervously, toward the microphone, holding it with both hands like it might slip away from her. Her clothes weren't trendy. Her hair was simple. There were no flashy lights, no backup dancers, just her. One student even muttered, "This is going to be so cringe." But Tamara didn't react. She didn't say a word. She just stood there, head slightly down, eyes fixed on the ground. Then, the music started. It was the instrumental of Listen by Beyoncé, a powerhouse ballad, a risky choice. Not even the best singers could pull it off easily. More murmurs from the crowd. One girl whispered, "She's seriously going to try this?" Tamara closed her eyes, and then something incredible happened. She sang, not just a note, but a sound so pure, so full of emotion, it instantly cut through the noise in the room. The laughter stopped, heads turned, people who were ready to record. A joke suddenly froze, their phones still in hand, but now pointed at something completely unexpected. Her voice was strong, not loud, not yet, but steady, rich, and soulful. You could hear every bit of pain, every lonely lunch, every quiet moment she spent singing to herself when no one else was around. As she hit the chorus, her voice soared. You could feel it. The gym was silent, not awkward silence, but stunned silence. That rare kind that happens when something real is happening. Something no one saw coming. Tamara wasn't just singing. She was telling her story, not with words, but through the cracks and power of her voice. And it hit different, even. The teachers were shocked. The principal leaned over and whispered, "Who knew she had that in her?" By the time she reached the final note, eyes still closed, hand shaking just slightly, the entire gym erupted. Standing ovation, cheers, whistles, people screaming her name. The same students who had laughed at her were now cheering her, like a star. Tamara opened her eyes, slowly. For a moment, she looked confused, like she wasn't sure if the applause was real. Then, for the first time, she smiled. A soft, almost shy smile. But you could see the pride behind it. She didn't need flashy clothes or popularity. She didn't need backup dancers. She didn't even need them to believe in her, because she believed in herself, even when no one else did. And now, finally, the world was listening. What happened next would change her life forever. Tamara stood there, frozen for a moment. The microphone in her hand trembled. Her fingers tightened around it as if it were her lifeline. She stood alone on the wide stage of Lincoln High's gymnasium, drowning under the harsh glare of the stage lights and the hundreds of eyes locked onto her. Some faces showed curiosity, others doubt, but a few, smirks. The kind that say, "This is going to be a disaster." She swallowed hard. This moment wasn't supposed to happen. A few weeks ago, she didn't even sign up for the talent show. Someone else had. Rumors were it was done as a prank, a cruel joke. Her name scribbled on the sign-up sheet by someone who thought it'd be funny to watch the poor, weird girl embarrass herself in front of the entire school. She knew. But Tamara didn't back out. She had grown up with people expecting the worst from her. So today, she decided to show them the truth. The music started. Soft piano chords filled the gym. It was the instrumental of Listen by Beyoncé, a song of strength, of breaking free, of finding your voice. Immediately, Whispers spread through the crowd. No way she can pull that off. She's going to crash so hard. Who does she think she is? Tamara heard it all, but she didn't let it in. She took one deep breath. Her eyes scanned the crowd, her classmates, teachers, even a few parents, all waiting, some hoping for failure, others unsure what to expect. And then she opened her mouth. The first note was soft, fragile even, but it was real. It carried weight, pain, passion, years of being overlooked, of hiding, of surviving. The giggles stopped. People leaned in. Her voice began to rise, slowly but surely, gaining power and clarity with every line. By the time she reached the first chorus, she was no longer that quiet girl from the back of the class. She was a force. Tamara closed her eyes, and something shifted. She wasn't on a school stage anymore. In her mind, she was back in her small bedroom, the one with peeling wallpaper and a broken closet door, singing quietly while her mom worked a double shift. She remembered the nights she cried herself to sleep because of bullies, hunger, and hopelessness. She remembered how music was the only thing that made her feel alive. And now, her voice carried all of that emotion, all of her story. Her voice wasn't just beautiful, it was honest, soulful, raw. It cracked in just the right places. It soared and shook the walls of the gym, not with volume, but with emotion. The gym, once buzzing with chatter, fell into stunned silence. You could hear a pin drop. Not even the teachers were prepared for what they were witnessing. Mrs. Carter, the school's choir director, was already in tears. One student whispered, "Is this really Tamara?" Another, who had once laughed at her during lunch, lowered his phone and just stared, speechless. Tamara reached the bridge of the song, the most powerful part, and held nothing back. Her voice climbed and held the high note effortlessly, echoing through the space like it was meant for something much bigger than a school talent show. And in that moment, everyone knew. This wasn't a joke. This wasn't a prank. This was greatness. When the final note faded and Tamara opened her eyes, the entire room erupted. Standing ovation, cheers, tears, shock. Some students stood frozen, unsure of how to react. Others jumped to their feet, clapping and screaming her name. Tamara looked out at the crowd, the same crowd that once ignored her, and for the first time she felt seen, truly seen. No one had ever heard anything like it, especially not from Tamara. Tamara stood there frozen for a moment. The microphone in her hand trembled slightly. Her palms were sweaty. She could hear the low hum of voices from the crowd, some whispering, some giggling, others just waiting to be entertained. The stage. Lights blinded her for a second, but even through them she could see the smirks, the crossed arms, the judgment in their eyes. She glanced down, wishing for a moment that the floor would swallow her whole. Then she looked up again, this time with a flicker of something different in her eyes. Not fear, but determination. The music began. It was the instrumental of Listen by Beyoncé, a bold, emotional ballad that only a few singers could pull off. A song about being overlooked, misunderstood, and finally stepping into your power. The whispers in the audience grew louder. Is she really trying to sing this? No way she's going to make it through. She's going to embarrass herself. Someone in the back chuckled. Another raised their phone, ready to record the disaster that was surely coming. A few students exchanged side eyes, already anticipating the awkwardness. But Tamara didn't flinch. She took a deep breath, and then she sang. The first note left her lips, soft but steady. It floated into the air, surprising everyone. The giggles faded instantly. People stopped mid-sentence. The ones with phones recording leaned in, their expressions shifting from amusement to disbelief. There was something different in her voice. It wasn't just the pitch. It was the feeling behind it. It was as if she wasn't singing to the audience, but through them. Every word, every note, carried a weight that made people stop and listen. Tamara's voice grew stronger as she continued. Her eyes closed, not out of fear, but because she was connecting with something deeper inside, something raw and real. She sang with the pain of a girl who had been ignored, mocked, and underestimated. She sang with the heart of someone who had spent lonely nights crying herself to sleep, using music to heal what words could not. Her voice rose, rich and soulful, echoing through the gymnasium. It was powerful, not just technically, but emotionally. It told a story. Her story. And the room silent. Every eye was on her. Every heart was listening. Even the teachers leaned forward in their seats, stunned. Mrs. Carter, the music teacher, covered her mouth with her hand, her eyes welling up with tears. Tamara reached the chorus, her voice unwavering as it soared across the room. "I'm more than what you made of me." The lyrics hit differently now. It wasn't just a song, it was a declaration, a breaking free, a moment of truth. By the time she reached the bridge, her voice had grown into something fierce and unforgettable. She hit every note with precision and power. It didn't matter that she wasn't wearing designer clothes, or that she didn't have backup dancers. It didn't matter that she had walked into school that morning unnoticed. Because now, all eyes were on her. As she sang the final lines, Tamara held the last note, long, clear, and full of emotion. Then, silence. The music faded. She opened her eyes. For a moment, no one moved. Then, the room exploded. A standing ovation. Students jumped to their feet. Teachers clapped with wide eyes. The same kids who once laughed at her now stood frozen, their mouths open in disbelief. Tamara didn't smile right away. She looked out at the crowd, still processing what had just happened, and then, slowly, she smiled. Not a big, flashy smile, just a quiet one. But behind it was a lifetime of pain, finally turning into pride. No one had ever heard anything like it, especially not from Tamara. And after that moment, no one would ever forget her name again. What most people didn't know was that Tamara had grown up in a rough part of town. That's kind of neighborhood where sirens were more common than songbirds, and where dreams often got buried under bills, broken promises, and boarded-up buildings. Life had never been easy for her. Her mother, a kind but exhausted woman, worked 2 jobs, one as a cleaner at a local hospital during the day, and another as a waitress at night, just to keep the lights on and food on the table. There were no vacations, no new clothes, just survival. Barely. Tamara never complained. She knew her mom was doing her best. But behind her quiet smile was a storm of emotions she never let anyone see. Music was her escape. It started when she was just 6. She'd sit by the old radio in their tiny apartment and mimic the voices she heard. Aretha Franklin, Whitney Houston, Lauryn Hill. At first, it was just a game. But over time, it became more than that. It became her therapy, her safe place. Every night after school, while others were hanging out or scrolling on their phones, Tamara would slip into her room, close the door, and sing. Not loudly, never. Loud enough for neighbors to hear, but with emotion that could fill a stadium. She sang to the walls, to the stars, to her pain, not for fame, not for attention, just to feel whole. She never had voice lessons, never took music classes, never posted videos online or auditioned for anything. Her voice was a secret, a sacred part of herself she wasn't ready to share with the world until that moment. It almost never happened. Weeks before the talent show, Tamara had been walking down the hallway after school, humming to herself like she always did. Quietly, barely a whisper. She thought no one was listening, but someone was. Mrs. Carter, the school's music instructor, had just stepped out of her classroom when she heard it, a soft, soulful hum echoing through the hallway. She stopped in her tracks. She didn't recognize the voice, but she knew what she heard. Raw talent, the kind that didn't come around often. She followed the sound like it was calling her, and when she saw Tamara, she couldn't believe it. "Was that you singing?" Mrs. Carter asked gently. Tamara froze. Her eyes widened. She shook her head quickly, too nervous to admit it. But Mrs. Carter wasn't fooled. She smiled kindly and said, "You have a gift, sweetheart. Don't ever hide it." From that day on, Mrs. Carter made it her mission to encourage Tamara. She didn't push, just gently guided. She invited Tamara to visit the music room during lunch, gave her old CDs to listen to, even printed out lyrics and asked Tamara if she wanted to sing, just for fun. And then, when the talent show was announced, Mrs. Carter asked Tamara the question that would change everything. Would you sing? Tamara's heart dropped. Her instinct was to say no. She didn't think she was good enough. What if people laughed? What if she froze? But Mrs. Carter looked her in the eyes and said something Tamara would never forget. You don't need stage lights, Tamara. You are the light. It was the first time someone believed in her, and sometimes that's all it takes. So Tamara said yes, scared, trembling, unsure. But yes, she practiced in secret, late at night when the world was quiet. She didn't tell anyone, not even her mom. She wanted it to be her moment, on her terms. And when the big day came, when she walked out onto that stage in front of the entire school, she wasn't just singing a song, she was telling her story, and finally, the world was listening. The next day, Tamara's performance was all anyone could talk about. The moment she stepped off that stage, everything started to change. Whispers turned into praise. Smirks turned into applause. And by the time the first period bell rang, the next morning, something unbelievable had happened. Someone had recorded her performance and uploaded it to social media. At first, just a few hundred people saw it. But then, it exploded. Within hours, Tamara's video was everywhere. On TikTok, on Instagram, even Facebook. It went viral. The comment sections filled with thousands of people from around the world. Goosebumps. Pure goosebumps. She's the real deal. How did no one know this girl had a voice like that? I cried listening to this. Thank you, Tamara. Celebrities started reposting it. Influencers were stitching it. Voice coaches were breaking it down on YouTube, shocked by her tone, her control, her soul. It wasn't just her voice that touched people. It was the emotion behind it. The honesty. And then came the emails. Local news stations reached out, wanting to interview her. A reporter came to the school to film a segment on The Girl with the Golden Voice. A radio station played her performance live on air. Then a national TV producer called. They wanted her to perform on their show. Even talent scouts, real ones, started reaching out, asking to speak with her family, offering voice training, studio time, and management contracts. Just days ago, Tamara was completely unknown outside of her school. Now, she was becoming a star. But through it all, Tamara stayed grounded. She didn't let the sudden attention change who she was. She still wore the same old hoodie to school. Still walked the same halls, carrying the same backpack she'd owned for 3 years. She still sat in the same seat in class. Quiet, respectful, observant. Only now. When she walked into a room, people looked at her differently. It wasn't pity anymore. It was pride. It wasn't judgment. It was admiration. Teachers gave her encouraging smiles. Students who had once laughed at her now nodded in respect. Some even apologized, embarrassed by how they had treated her before. The same kids who once whispered behind her back were now the loudest, cheering her on. And Tamara, she just kept singing. Not for fame, not for money, but because singing was still the one place where she felt most herself. No cameras, no crowds, just her and the music. She started volunteering to sing at local events. A church invited her to sing on Sunday morning. A children's hospital asked her to perform for their young patients. Everywhere she went, she brought not just her voice, but hope. She hadn't just found her voice. She had set it free, and more importantly, she showed other quiet, overlooked kids like her that they didn't have to shout to be heard. They didn't need to fit in to be special. They just needed to believe in their own light, even when no one else could see it. Because sometimes it takes just one voice to wake the world up, and now, the world was listening. Tamara's journey was only beginning. But she had already taught her school and the internet a lesson they'd never forget. Don't underestimate the quiet ones. Don't ignore the unnoticed. Because one day, when they finally speak, they might change everything.